So maybe it's fair to say CDC will regulate our decision, right? I mean, if they loosen up.
So I guess we're streaming live now. It started.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome. Welcome to the Scarborough Middle School Parent Forum. We have a couple of guests here today. Todd Jepson, our Director of Facilities, and Sanford Prince, our Superintendent, to answer a few of the questions. The information that we are sharing tonight, as a reminder, we are looking at federal, state, and local guidelines. We are also looking at all of the work that our START task force recommended in the areas of health operations, academic, and social emotional learning. And this forum addresses the additional questions that have come up in our parent forum question and answer after the last forum. So digital etiquette, please turn off your microphones during the presentation. If you have any specific questions, please send them to me or send them to David Courier, the assistant principal. And also during the presentation, I'm not sure if the chat feature is turned on right now, but if it is, you could type your questions into the chat. And if not, we'll have you raise your hands at when there's time to answer questions. So under health and operations, we have been continuing to have questions about our air system, particularly in the portables. So I'm going to hand this over to Todd Jepson, who is the expert in this area.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an absolute expert, but I think I have answers to these questions here about the filters in the air handling and air conditioning systems, HEPA grade filters. And do they capture 99.7% of all particles greater than 0.3 microns? The answer to that question is no. HEPA filters are typically designed for specialized ultra clean facilities such as hospitals, medical manufacturing facilities, nuclear power plants, and our HVAC systems were not built or designed to handle HEPA filtration. So that they do have filters in them, but they're not HEPA rated. But again, HEPA filtration is a highly specialized filter system, not typically seen in schools. How many air exchanges per hour occur in the portable classrooms? And will this number change when colder weather arrives because of heating cost concerns? That is a question that I have to answer basically saying that it varies. It varies on a number of things. It varies on the size of the classroom, the number of occupants in the classroom, and how much outside air we're pulling in. So there's two different systems in the 6th grade portable. There are 8 classrooms that have rooftop units that have MERV 8 filters in them that bring in outside air and either heat it or cool it as it comes in, and then exhaust out the stale air or the sort of your exhaled air. And in the 4 classrooms that are closest to the main middle school, those have a direct air exchange that brings in direct outside air, run through a filter also. And then there are 2 devices that heat and now cool. We've actually added cooling to those first 4 classrooms. So they have heat pumps that can heat and cool. And then they have an additional gas monitor heater for in the winter. So the question about whether the number of changes will change during colder weather, we certainly aren't worried about. I mean, I shouldn't say we're never worried about heating cost concerns, but in a situation like the pandemic, we would work to certainly temper the cold air and get as much fresh air in as is reasonable. Now, if we have a morning when it's 15 degrees below zero outside, it's very difficult to bring that air in without freezing something up. But it's typically not 15 below during school days. In those cases, on those rooms that have air exchangers, we do disable those in any air temperatures below 20. So because the heating system simply just can't keep up. So the fresh air there would have to be cycled on, on those air exchangers if they wanted more fresh air in those first 4 rooms. But the heat pump should be able to bring in tempered air and keep everybody perfectly comfortable in those rooms.
Thank you, Todd, for that information on our heating systems, the portables. Some other questions that have come in regarding masks, and a parent had asked, would a plastic face shield be used instead of a mask at school? And just a reminder, as we mentioned in our first presentation, that face masks are going to be required of all of our students and staff while they're in the building. A face shield would not take place of a mask. It could be used in conjunction with a face mask. Some of our students with specialized needs may be wearing face shields as part of their program, and our general education students would not be required to wear one, but would be expected to wear a face mask. Would the students be able to remove masks during instruction? As I mentioned, all the time that students are in school, the expectation is that they will have a mask on, and there will be breaks during the day. There will be breaks for lunch where they would not have a mask, and there will be 2 mask breaks during the course of the day, and those are being plugged into our schedule. In the cafeteria, the question was, is there a way that someone could bring their own lunch boxes in a recycled lunchbox? Yes, they can. What we would ask, though, is when the lunchbox came home, for the safety of the people at home, making sure that they're cleaning that lunchbox with a generalized bleach solution. And containers being disposable, if a student were to bring in a lunch that had, let's say, Tupperware, then that would not be what we would consider disposable. They could use the Tupperware, stick that back in their lunchbox. We would ask that when students are having lunch, they would be 6 feet minimum social distance. And we would ask that there is no food sharing, no container sharing, and that everything that a student brings in is their own. They don't allow others to touch or to use that. For the traffic flow, we talked quite a bit about traffic flow for pickup, but there's also a traffic flow for a pickup at the end of the day. And so drop off, we discussed in the morning, that will be rerouted to both the former bus loop and the parent drop-off loop. I spoke with Officer Pellerin, our SRO, and we made plans to make sure that the traffic patterns are in working order for our first day. With that in mind, there will be a pickup, and at the end of the day, students who are going to be picked up will also be picked up in both the bus loop, the former bus loop, and the parent pickup loop. We would ask to make sure that the question was possibly using side parking lots. Unfortunately, what happens when people use the side parking lot, let's say, for example, by the gym, other people can't get out of the parking lot with people parked in there. Oftentimes, people need to leave for appointments, for emergencies, and if parents are parked in that side lot by the gym, staff can't get out or other parents can't get out. So we would ask to be respectful for that. All other side parking areas, for example, over by the 6th grade portable or behind our school, will be blocked off. That will not be for parent pickup or drop off.
Dave, can I just butt in for 1 second?
Absolutely.
A question came to me asking about air conditioning in the 6th grade portable, and the 6th grade portable is entirely air conditioned now. We had air conditioning units installed in those 4 classrooms that did not have air conditioning. We did get that installed this past spring. So everyone should be climate controlled in there, even on the hot days. So I hope that makes sense and alleviates some concerns.
Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
And before we do switch to the next part, the next slide, I would like to mention that there have been parents, and we have discussed this as a staff, to have some type of a flow chart as far as drop-offs and pickups. And we are in the process of taking a Google map and routing how our traffic flow would be on that. So parents could hear how we're planning on utilizing our traffic flow, but they can also see it. So that parents should look forward to that coming home over the next few days. We are presently working on a visual for that as well. So the next section for health questions that came up: will students and staff be required to take their body temperatures prior to entering the school each day? And that is not a recommendation that has been brought to the school. There are so many variables with the device that someone might be taking a temperature with also how accurate. There have been many false positives with temperatures. So that is not a component of our pre-screening. That screening information has been shared, and we will continue to share that and post that on our websites, that if there are certain symptoms that are coming up for students, whether it's a sore throat or a runny nose or muscle aches, along those lines, there's a whole list of symptoms that would expect a parent to keep a child at home. So at the present time, body temperature checks are not part of our screening protocol. If a person has symptoms but no fever, what would happen during that situation is we would be following all CDC guidelines, and a student, whatever symptoms they may be having, would be sent to our clinic on any normal day of school, even before the pandemic, and the nurse would assess the needs of the student, whether they would be sent back to class or would be sent home, and that will stay in place. So a student, if they're having some type of symptoms but no fever, they would go to our clinic. Our nursing staff would assess and determine the next steps in compliance with CDC guidelines. And this would be the same if a student were coughing in school, that a student would be sent to our nurse's office, and again, they would determine our next steps. What will be the hand washing routine? That is a very important part. And in fact, on Thursday at our school board meeting, Dr. Fanberg talked about 3 of the very important ways that we can protect our school community. And one was wearing masks. The second was social distancing. And probably one of the most important that he mentioned was a hand washing routine. So with that in mind, we are in the process of posting signs throughout our school about hand sanitization. There will be hand stations, hand washing stations, hand sanitizing stations throughout our school, and it will be posted all through our school. We will discuss this with our students, in our crew, in our classes, during lunches, at every point during the course of the day that we can possibly reinforce those hand washing routines.
So I did want to answer any questions on health and operations, but because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see if there's any questions that have come up in a chat. Can you see any?
So when you're in the webinar format, the chat is not available.
Okay.
And so that being said, I do not see any attendees who currently have their hand raised.
Okay.
Certainly, if someone is watching this on Zoom and has a question, there is a raise hand feature that they should be able to use.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
if you could monitor that, Diane, that would be great.
Sure. And here is one. So there is a question from John. And I am going to bring him in so he can ask that. John, if you unmute
Hello.
yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It looks like you've muted yourself again, John.
Yeah, I don't know how, but thank you.
Okay.
I know he said that the body temperature would not be taken for students or staff, and I know the students will be doing their self-assessment for health at home. Are the teachers and staff members and school bus drivers also going to be going through that same like self-health assessment, before, each school day, before interacting with students?
Yes, they are. They've
Okay.
received a check sheet.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rowe.
Yes. Any more questions about health and operations or for Todd Jepson before he signs off? He's in high demand and has another meeting coming up.
Oh, there is another question from Monica. I'm going to bring Monica in.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
I was just wondering if a student has to stay home with the sniffles or something, will they be able to tune in remotely on that day and still
Yes,
get?
yes, they will. And that's actually in my next slide.
Awesome. Thank you.
It
That's
kind of crosses both areas, health and operations and academics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if somebody thinks of a question with health and operations, we can certainly answer it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so academics. Move. So I am going to let Superintendent Sandy Prince answer the first question because we are having quite a few questions come in about at what point will the district determine that in-person learning will be 5 days a week?
Sandy, you're on mute right now.
Sorry about that. I think it would be a team effort. We would sit down with the school nurse and the principal and perhaps get the DOE, Department of Ed, involved in looking at our situation. There are going to be different circumstances when schools are going to do this. We've not done it before necessarily, where you just close the school for good or you have everybody go remote all the time. I think that health self-assessment is really critical. And I think the other thing, if the school is impacted, we would try to find who was impacted or who brought this in. And again, we could work with Todd and do even more cleaning. Maybe we go remote for a week in that particular building and reassess it. I think it really depends on the circumstance, but it's a good question and something that hopefully we won't have to deal with, but we're prepared to deal with it if we have to.
Okay, so the second question, if my child has a cold, cough on the day he is scheduled to be in person, could he do remote that day instead of taking a sick day? And yes, we want students to be able to attend whenever possible. And so we would ask that you call the main office and just say that your child will be out, but they will be tuning in remotely. And that's the same thing for if a student does need to be quarantined, they can certainly attend school remotely during that time period. How will SMS and the district handle snow days? And Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe when you presented to the school board, it was probably about a month ago, you did mention that we would have our snow days, that we would not be doing remote learning on those days.
That's correct.
So are the students being placed in classes by level? In 7th and 8th grade, in order to keep students in their cohort, in their crew for the day, they we are grouping students by their math courses. And that's one of the reasons why we are not able to place students in their crew class for the day by world language. So I have had some parents reach out to say, to see if we've looked at that, and we just cannot do it. The middle school schedule is very complex, and we wouldn't be able to have students be in by math class and in by language. Will a syllabus be available to parents and students for what is covered during the first quarter, semester, or year? The middle school teachers do not give out syllabuses, but they do have units that are planned for the year with the skills and the standards and learning goals that will be covered. And those are pieces that teachers post on Google Classroom. And we will be having some parent trainings that are optional trainings so that you can learn more about how to monitor Google Classroom and also PowerSchool. So to kind of learn how to dig in and look at individual assignments in PowerSchool. And will there be a remote plan ready at all times in case there needs to be a rapid transition to full-time remote for all students? That's how we've set our schedule up so that students are on a 8:40 to 2:30 schedule. And if we went to remote, they, instead of going to class, they would just log into their remote class. So we're ready to go for that flexibility and moving from one plan to another. Yes, students will be provided a set of books for home learning. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get together some of the books that have come in already for when the remote students pick up their laptops, to give them a planner, which we have. There'll be a math book and their spring book, ELA book. So they will receive the same materials. So if a student is only doing online, how will test, quizzes, and presentations be handled? They can be handled in a variety of ways. Students can present to their class remotely. They can also take a quiz through a form, or there are online platforms to take quizzes and tests. Also, a teacher can be monitoring the students just sitting at home at their desk taking a test and watch them while they take it. So there are a variety of ways that a teacher will set this up. So will we continue to have late start Wednesdays? Not in the traditional sense. Students will always have their classes from 8 to 11, and then teachers have that afternoon time for their professional development. So there will not be any Wednesday mornings that students do not have school from 8 to 11. So cohort A, I understand sixth graders start in person on Tuesday, September 7th, which I believe that is an 8th. And then the 9th is the day that, yes, all students will start virtually. And we will be having some guidelines, but our major goal for that first remote Wednesday is just to have students log into their crew class, meet the students in their crew, meet their teacher, and during the time that the teachers have for planning coming up, they're going to be planning some activities and get to know you activities with the students for that first virtual day. And so the next question is about, will cohort A students be able to watch the teacher live with streaming? So when the students are in person in class, there will be students at home on a remote learning day. They'll log into Google Meets. And so it won't be being recorded or live stream. It'll just be those students on Google Meets that the teacher is interacting with along with the students in person. So that will be occurring. What also may occur is teachers in large rooms with the wall that opens up, they may be doing some creative grouping where one of the teachers might teach the students live and another teacher might be just on the Google Meets with the students remotely. So teachers will be trying some different variety with that, but there will always be some portion of the day where it's both in person and the other students remotely or on Google Meets. The way that it's planned so that there is new learning Monday through Friday. There might be times, though, that a teacher does an activity live with students on Monday, Tuesday, and then also does it live on Thursday, Friday. And rather than having a set schedule that requires sitting in their screens for the day, is it possible to have students, to move my picture, oops, sorry. Students self-paced. So we do not want students on their laptops all day from the 8 to the 2:30. Students will log in at the beginning of a class and the teacher may do a check-in for directions, and then the students would then log off of Google Meets and actually work on their work, but knowing that the teacher is there if they have questions. Or there may be a lesson at the beginning of the class where there is some direct instruction going on. But again, there'll be time where the students are working and not on their laptop. And if a student chooses to do that work later in the evening, for families' flexibility, that's okay. But one of the things we really heard was students need their teachers to be able to check in with them. And that's why even on remote days, the teachers will be there for them in a regular schedule. And so we didn't have any particular questions on social emotional learning. And so feel free, again, when I stop and we have people ask questions. But so in the CASEL framework, relationship skills and building relationships with students is one of the top priorities as we start the school year. I'm actually going to stop sharing now. And Diane, if you could bring people in to ask questions.
Yeah, there's a question from Deb. Deb, if you just unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify this, the first day of school for 7th graders. You had it listed as 9/8, but it's 9/9, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
In the question that they just had their dates off.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions right now, but certainly if there are people watching that have one, you can just raise your hand using that feature on Zoom. I'm not seeing any.
Okay.
Kathy, are there other big questions that have been coming up in your conversation with parents as folks have been reaching out to you that you think the
those were the questions in addition to, you know, the questions that we answered last week in the presentation. I'm sure more will surface.
Mhm.
And I just really want everyone to know that we are going to be continuing to evaluate how things are going and, you know, asking for feedback and making adjustments.
Great. So what are some of the important dates that are coming up for families? Do you have some things coming up later this week?
Yes, and I'll reshare the last slide of my presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, wait, here's sharing screen. So let's reshare. I'm not going to the next slide here. Let's try this. There we go. So we have our Chromebook deployment, and the dates are correct on the slide today. August 27th is for 7th graders, and August 28th is for 8th graders from 8 to 11 and 12 to 3 each day. And we ask that you try to come during your scheduled time, but we realize that all families can't make this schedule. And also, if you have a student that's both a 7th and an 8th grader, and it's just students coming into the building to get their laptops, and 6th graders can come during either of those times. Again, we're going to be handing out yearbooks during this time period. The 6th graders that received their laptops on September 8th, I do believe we've received some of the yearbooks from last year to give out on that day. And we have had some parents emailing to say they just cannot make it on the 27th or 28th. So they've been emailing me, and we even have a makeup session for parents on Monday, August 31st from 8 to 10.
Great.
And that was the end of the presentation. So have you seen any other questions come up?
Not as of now.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm sure we will have more question and answer sessions as the year progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.